When you hear the name Charles Lindbergh, most people think of the famous pilot. But at the turn of the century, it was his father that made headlines. Charles Lindbergh Senior was a respected US Congressman from Minnesota, but his alliance with the Nonpartisan League made him the target of anti-progressive forces during the 1918 Republican primary.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun.
In the spring of 1918, the Nonpartisan League and an accompanying Workers' Nonpartisan League, which had been organized in Minnesota, chose to run Charles A. Lindbergh, the father of the famous flyer, for governor. Lindbergh was a Republican. He'd served in Congress for a number of years from Minnesota as a Republican. But he opposed, very publicly and very strongly opposed, American entry into World War I. He blamed it on, quote, the money trust. He invented that term and wrote a book with that title. And he was not exactly loved by the large banks of the country or by the banks in Minneapolis.
And the time has come when every citizen must declare himself American or traitor.
He did, in 1918, undertake that at a time when it took a great deal of personal courage to challenge the hysteria against anti-war people that had been built up in Minnesota. The patriotism hysteria, the fear of immigrants and of what were known as hyphenated Americans, like German-American. And with considerable courage, he undertook that primary election and campaigned in the state. But Lindbergh won the hearts of the Nonpartisan League farmers and the union laborers of Minnesota in that campaign, and for good reason.
There was a tremendous amount of action taken against the Nonpartisan League during that campaign. Lindbergh not only was arrested, but he gave a speech, and when he came out of the speech, they had beaten up his driver and they shot at them. And they left town, and Lindbergh said, you know, don't drive too fast, they'll think we're scared.
The Minnesota legislature under the Republican Party created the Commission of Public Safety, which was a strange act. It created this commission that had dictatorial powers in Minnesota. No foreign-born person could teach school in the state. The German language was not actually outlawed, but it was very much frowned upon. The town of New Ulm had a town meeting to discuss the new draft law and to question the constitutionality of drafting young men and sending them overseas to fight. That had never been done before in the United States. By the very fact that they questioned the draft and questioned the constitutionality of it, the governor, quite illegally, removed the mayor and all of the elected officers. Anyone who had had anything to do with organizing the meeting. Newspapers all over the state railed against the traitors in New Ulm. The Commission of Public Safety was a very dark time, dark spot on Minnesota's history. Civil liberties practically vanished in the state. That brought a large element of people who were normally very conservative, Republican-leaning voters over to the Nonpartisan League because the very bitterness of being persecuted illegally in that way.
So the climate was rather tense, but became more tense as time went on. The Public Safety Commission, which had the authority to do things necessary and proper to protect the public safety, was very shortly interpreted to mean try to stop dissent, because they were afraid of losing their political power because they had heard that the Nonpartisan League was starting to organize, and that was a threat to them. They created something called the Home Guard, which were these sort of local vigilante types They also worked in conjunction with sheriffs and other local officials. So when the Nonpartisan League started organizing, they were sort of spying on them. And then when the campaign got in higher gear in the spring of 1918, all kinds of trouble took place.
That was a very fierce and pretty awful election. A number of counties would not allow Lindbergh to speak within the county. They had already forbidden Nonpartisan League organizers to enter the county. There were a number of instances of mob violence. There was shooting at Lindbergh. There were threats on his life, hanging in effigy. It was a very ugly time. It took a lot of courage to campaign around the state of Minnesota, but he apparently had it. He just quietly went his way and campaigned. In the end, he was defeated by Governor Burnquist, who was an incumbent Republican governor. So it was a decisive defeat. He did not run for public office again. He became one of the organizers of the Farmer Labor Party, but his health began to fail, and he died early in the 1920s, so he didn't live to see the success of the Farmer Labor Party.
Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.